As Commissar for Nationalities, Stalin worked on the project of the creation of the USSR, Union of Soviet Socialist Republics. He was in negotiations with Georgia and Ukraine and every other Soviet republic which existed on the territory of the former Russian Empire. During the revolution, they all got apart. But during the Civil War, Bolsheviks came to power in the majority of them. So they tended to come closer together. But according to what principle? Stalin suggested a federation with the internal autonomy. What that meant was that all the state bodies and economic bodies would be the union bodies, one body for the whole country. But there would be internal autonomy in cultural, language, education, and other humanitarian issues. Lenin at first supported this plan, but then he wanted to refine it. He thought that, at least formally, the republic should have the right to secede, and also that, at least formally, this should be a union of the equals, not one big brother and smaller brothers. Actually, almost all the existing republics accepted this plan, but Georgians objected and Ukrainians started to doubt. This ended in a Georgian row, that is, the representatives of Moscow, and among them was Ordzhonikidze, Stalin's closest friend, were rather wroth with the Georgian leadership. And Lenin did not like it at all, so he objected. Stalin discussed Lenin's position behind his back with the Central Committee. And his tone was actually quite rude. For the first time, he was saying things like, well, let him do what he wants, or I don't think that we should agree to that. And he even allowed a bit of mockery in that discussion. Here is Stalin and Sergo Ordzhonikidze, his close friend, who found himself in the center of the Georgian row. The USSR was finally formed on 30th December 1922. The Union Constitution included clauses on secession, the right of the republics to secede, and it was a union. So Lenin had won the debate, but it was quite obvious that it was a formal independence. Nobody was going to give the republics the right to secede in reality. But contradictions between Lenin and Stalin continued. It could be felt that Lenin was losing his authority, and he knew that. And he didn't like the fact that now Stalin was much stronger than all his opponents. So he started to object to various smaller issues. For example, Stalin and the Central Committee offered the liberalization of trade monopoly. Lenin and Trotsky were dead against it. Again, Lenin won. But as a result of this confrontation, Lenin suggested Trotsky to work closer together. And Trotsky tried. Stalin was outraged. He, being the general secretary of the party, refused to include Trotsky's speech at the Congress of the Soviets, which was to take place soon. Then followed the row between Stalin and Krupskaya. This is Stalin and Krupskaya at one of the meetings. And you can see that Krupskaya is actually very tense, and Stalin doesn't look at her at all. So that was not a pleasant meeting for either, I think. The problem between Stalin and Krupskaya was that it was Krupskaya who gave Trotsky Lenin's letters. And Stalin was outraged because formally he had to control Lenin's contacts. Lenin's health deteriorated, and you can see him here with Krupskaya in the last months of his life. So the Politburo decided that Lenin's health should be protected, and Stalin was given the task to guard the amount of work Lenin was allowed to do, first, and second, he was tasked with controlling all Lenin's contacts, so that party members would not bother him without any particular business. Stalin apologized to Krupskaya for being rude, but Lenin was not satisfied. In December and January, Lenin wrote 2 letters to the party Congress, which was to be convened in April 1923. In the first letter, he wrote that he was not sure that Stalin would be cautious enough with the power that he concentrated in his hands. In the second letter, he suggested that Stalin should be removed from his position as General Secretary of the party. Moreover, in March, Lenin wrote to Trotsky, suggesting that he, Trotsky, should speak to the party Congress. Unfortunately, Lenin declined very quickly after that. His health deteriorated, and he could not speak at the Congress, and he could not prepare that Congress. You can see here Lenin in the last weeks of his life, and it is quite obvious that he was incapable of any action. So after Lenin's decline, the internal party struggle unfolded in earnest. First of all, there were 3 main allies, Stalin, Zinoviev, and Kamenev. These were the main leaders of the party who acted against Trotsky and who organized the Politburo and the Central Committee against Trotsky. But there was internal discord even among these allies, these 3 allies. Zinoviev, who was the only real rival of Stalin, or at least he thought he was the real rival of Stalin, Zinoviev suggested the reorganization of the Central Committee Secretariat to include several more people, including himself. But Stalin was past master in this administrative intrigue. So he organized another meeting of the Politburo, extraordinary meeting, to discuss the pending revolution in Germany and the Soviet position, the Soviet attitude to that revolution. So that meeting took place, and the issues were passionately discussed, and everybody forgot about the reorganization of the Secretariat. Instead, what happened was Voroshilov, who was Stalin's ally and friend, was put on the governing bodies of the army, where Trotsky was king. So Trotsky was insulted. This is Voroshilov. He was certainly not considered a very talented officer, a very talented military organizer. So no wonder that Trotsky was insulted. Trotsky wrote to Lenin and to the Central Committee against the Politburo decision. But this was obviously factionalism. So the whole of the Central Committee was now against Trotsky. Lenin died in January 1924, and you can see there are many leaders around his open coffin. And here too you can see Stalin and Kamenev, but Trotsky was not there. This was one of his greatest mistakes. He did not attend